All right, if I could just get your attention, please. Welcome, everybody, whether in this physical space here at Old Government House at the University of Auckland or elsewhere, wherever you may find yourself. Hopefully you're ready for an engaging discussion on river futures in Aotearoa. That's the event that we're orchestrating here. Before we start, I'd just like to ask Dan Hikaroa to come up to give us a few opening, welcoming comments.
O ka tira kia ora mai tātou, ngā mihi. Ngā mihi o te pō ki a koutou katoa. Kāti, kia hiwara, kia hiwara tēnā tuku, kia hiwara tērā tuku, kia hiwara, i ngā waka, i ngā haue whā, i ngā iwi, ngā manu kōrero o rungo o ngā marae, whakarongo. Ki te tangi a te manu e tangi nei, tui a. Tui ai runga, tui ai raro, tui ai roto, tui a i waho. Tui a i te here tangata. Ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao. Tui e te kāwai tangata i heke mai i he waiki nui. I he waiki roa, i he waiki pamamao. I hono ki te wairua, ki te whaiao, ki te ao mārama, tihei, mauri ora. Ka teka he mihi ki te mana whenua a Ngāti Whātua Rākei. Nau ngā kaitiaki o tēnei rohe, o tēnei whāre wānanga hoki. Nō reira, tēnā koutou Ngāti Whātua Rākei. Homai tō kākahu whakamahana i te tautoko tēnei kaupapa, he kaupapa aroha, he kaupapa whakanui, he kaupapa whakahirahira. He mokopuno o Waikato Tainui e kōrero nei, nō reira i tuanau i raro i te mana o te tātou paunamu i wainga a Ngāti Whātua Rākei, Waikato Tainui me ngā pohi, nā po te tau te whiro, kei poke kāroa, kei poke kawa. Nō reira, i tuanau i te taha o te School of Environment, i te pōnei, mai wai papa taumata rau, koina te ingoa hou o tēnei wānanga, wai papa taumata hou. Nau mai haere mai ki tēnei wānanga, River Futures in Aotearoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou. Kia ora mai tātou katoa. Let's go.
Thanks immensely, Dan, for opening words. On behalf of the head of school, Julie Rowland, and the research committee for the School of Environment here at the University of Auckland, I'm delighted to welcome you to this event. My name is Gary Briley. I'm Chair of Physical Geography. I'm a professor in the School of Environment here at the University of Auckland. In light of a crazy 2020, ever-changing circumstances, as we've certainly had experience of just this very week, the research committee at the University of Auckland in the school decided to replace the annual invited lectures for this year to make this one event, this research forum. So this research forum replaces the Bartram Lecture for Earth Sciences for 2020, the Cumberland Lecture for Geography for 2020, and the Hay Lecture for Environmental Sciences for 2020. So we put everything together in one grab bag. So that's what you're going to experience for the next 90 minutes or so. This research forum, entitled River Futures in Aotearoa, encapsulates the kinds of breadth of issues that we study in the School of Environment, right? The transdisciplinary practices, governance framings alongside our role in the Faculty of Science here at the University of Auckland. The event is something of an experiment, right, as we try things out in multiple ways here. And obviously, we hope that you find it both interesting and useful. As a starting premise, we'd argue that many people in Aotearoa care passionately about our rivers and the state of our rivers. The well-being of rivers, their ora, provides a measure of our own well-being. Somehow, it seems part of the Kiwi psyche, this relationship. to our land, our river systems. It's perhaps appropriate that for those of us who are here in person, we're in or adjacent to Old Government House, because this provides us, a reminder of how past institutional framings shaped what happens to our river systems today, the state that they're in, and the trajectories of those river systems. And at the same time, the institutional frameworks that we come up with shape what the future of rivers is going to be like in this country. So we have an opportunity and a prospect to look at those shapings or framings for these things. This type of event and the range of speakers prompts us to reflect upon ancestral connections to river systems, to respect their diversity, to consider the rights of the river, to consider the role of rivers themselves as living entities. I hope during this event we can engage in generative discussions to consider what steps we need to take to look after our rivers and to enhance their condition into the future. In global terms, Aotearoa is a very special place for looking at these kinds of issues. In fact, a whole range of institutional responses to the challenges of our time. Across the world, people are looking to people here for guidance, a sense of hope in how we can shape future agendas. There's a growing movement in different parts of the world for river cultures, and Aotearoa should lie at the heart of that kind of movement. In these fast-changing and uncertain times, it's important to see river management as an ongoing commitment, the way we relate to river systems, not as a series or a collection of projects. In this light, it's important to look after the values of each river system, not setting out to make river systems the same, respecting the inherent diversity and values of each and every river system. This entails use of best available knowledge to support the management of each river system, looking at this alongside local knowledges and connections to local values and relations for each of our river systems. But we're in a diverse land. How do these issues play out in urban and rural settings? How will such framings be reimagined within revised versions of the RMA? How will we enhance prospects for rivers to speak for themselves into the future? These are some of the themes that will be discussed in today's workshop. The inspiration for this workshop was seeded a couple of years ago at a conference in Aotearoa, right? It was a conference on organised by the International Society for River Science, when it was on integrating multiple values in river management. That was the theme of the conference. But the most important thing that I noted at that event was just how many young, passionate, enthusiastic individuals were in that room. Just what can we do to shape prospects for that next generation of practitioners to engage generatively in looking after our river systems? What kind of work will those people be doing in the future? What kinds of roles and what kinds of institutions will they be a part of? How will they be supported to fulfill their ambitions, their aspirations in that work? What knowledge bases will inform practice? What policy and legislative frameworks will they be working within? We're constantly reshaping those agendas, and that presents lots of opportunities for us to move forward. So hopefully this event can move into some of those spaces, right, in the time that we have. The format for the event is as follows. We have 5 invited panelists that reflect a range of different perspectives and background interests and on these issues. And I've asked 5 colleagues, past or present, from within the School of Environment to provide brief introductions, right, for each of these panellists, just to give a bit of idea for the spread of interest in the school. And I've also approached protagonists or colleagues to ask questions towards the end to give some focal point for the discussion, right, as we move forward through this. That will take place after all of the presentations have occurred, so we'll go through the 5 panellists first, and then we'll have chance for some general discussion, and those questions will be posed. And there will be an opportunity, using a function called Slido or Slido or whatever it's called, for others who are outside to put questions forward, and then we can sift through them to get a sense of what general interest may be on particular topics or themes. Anyway, that's enough from me. I'll want to move on as quickly as I can. I've used my allocated time. So let's get into this. And we have the first of the introductions that will be made by Nāremu, and we can proceed with that right now.
Nā tātou katoa, ko Ruape'u te manga, ko Wanganui te awa, ko Wanganui te iwi, ko Rangiwai te rangite i te upārai toku pāpā, ko Lingrafith toku māma, ko Ngāremu uia te upārai toku ingoa. My name is Nāremu, and I currently am doing honours in geography, learning from John Tunnicliffe and Gary Briley, which has been an absolute privilege, and learning lots about rivers so I can love, heal and protect my awa. And they asked me if I could get Gerard Albert along for this talk tonight, who has been a lead negotiator in the legal personhood of the Wanganui River and so much more than that. One of our iwi leaders and really knowledgeable and a really great person to have in my life.
Akati tēnā koutou e noho mai nā ki roto tamaki. Ia au e noho nei ki te maru o tōku are. Ki Wanganui, ia au wakaronga ake ai ki ngā kōrero e hora nei. Ki roti tēnā ore e noho nei koutou. Nō reira tēnā koe te tuaine, nā ura te tangata i o ka marama, kuai au, e a te take. Ko tau mai au i runga i teipurangi, a kia kōrero ki te meninga i roti tēnei pō. Nō reira tēnā oki rā koutou, tēnā oki rā tātou. Thank you, Nāremu, for that generous introduction. And I greet everyone that's gathered together in Auckland tonight. As I sit in Wanganui, inside my house, and stare out at the river. I'm sorry I can't be there in person tonight, but this is the next best thing. And in any sense, both the single lanes on our bridges are working at the moment, so it's a good place to stay. Ka te ukira, mi ana ki te unga nā koutou rā tēnei ui I karanga, kia wāwā aku kōrero, nā ki te meninga kua hui nei, maringa nui, ki rātou o karongo mai ai, I runga I te teipura. Nō reira tēnā koutou. I'm going to try and share screen now and present a short presentation of less than 10 minutes length. Christopher, I hope I can do this. Nope. Yeah, that's not it. All right. Hoki ki te timatanga. Te take. Sorry, everyone. Now back to normal. I have to figure out how to share the screen, sorry. Christopher, can you help me? I'm pushing share screen. Yeah. Maximum. Is that up, Chris? All right. I might have to pass it over to the next speaker and come back so I can sort out my my share screen. Sorry, everyone.
...2020 moment. Right? I think that we've all been forever adjusting as we contemplate complex adaptive systems, and that adaptation word is certainly a very integral part of how we're approaching things right now. I think we will, as Gerard just suggested, we'll just move directly on to the introduction for Anne Salmon. So I think hopefully, Chris, you've got that in place and we can just move on to that. We've got a 1 second minute. Yeah.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Karen Fisher toko ingoa. It is an honour and a privilege to be able to introduce Professor Dame Anne Salmon, our next speaker this evening. But it's not without its challenges. My instructions were to keep it short, which feels like an almost impossible task given all of her accomplishments and achievements. So aroha mai for having to rush this introduction, which does not do justice to a woman of such high esteem. Professor Dame Anne Salmon is a distinguished professor of Māori Studies and Anthropology here at Te Wharewananga o Tāmaki Makaurau. She's an author, historian, anthropologist, public scholar working beyond the academy, environmentalist, the recipient of numerous awards and honours, including New Zealander of the Year in 2013, and she even has her own Wikipedia page. Through her work, she has sought to work across time, space, and worlds to explore and understand who we are as a nation of different peoples, to understand where we've come from, how we fit in the world, and where we might be headed. I am personally inspired by her work on ontological difference and inconsistencies and what this means in terms of thinking about how we relate to other people, things, and beings. So I'm very excited that she is able to be with us here tonight. So, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, no mai, haere mai, Professor Anne Salmon.
Ia te rangatira, rei rangatira maa, e Gerard, ka nui ngā mihi aroha ki a koe, tērā taha o te motu. I'm sitting in Te Tairāwhiti. I'm on the east coast at present, and I'm looking out at Motukil, the local maunga. I have a stream on one side of me, the Waitui. I've got another stream on the other side, the Waikereru. They both run into the Waimata River, which is flowing just behind me. And so I feel completely surrounded by waterways and the topic of this research forum. I was kind of thinking that Gerard would be introducing us to Te Ao Māori, but I'll say a few words which I know that he will be able to speak to in much greater depth and detail. But in Te Ao Māori, as I've learned over many years of instruction by people like Gerard and kaumātua like Edwina Sterling and others, rivers are born from the primal parents, from Rangi Nui, the Sky Father, and Papatua Nuku, the Earth Mother. And they are the beings from whom all life descends. And at the beginning of the world, when Rangi and Papa were forcibly separated by their offspring, Rangi wept for Papatua Nuku, and his tears became the rivers that flow upon the land, at least in some accounts, the rivers and lakes. And so here I am surrounded by waterways, and Gerard was saying to me on the chat before, he was saying the whale water flows in all directions off the whale's back, and our rivers need to flow clear and clean. And he was talking about, I guess, the great fish, the fish of Maui. He's on one fluke in Te Taihawodu, I'm on the other in Tairāwhiti, the other side of the island. And in this kind of way of thinking, humans and rivers are linked up with all other life forms and landscape elements in a very complex web of relationships. Whakapapa, genealogy, but it's not really genealogy in the Western sense, because it includes all life forms. And the rights and responsibilities between the different elements in the world are derived from these ancestral relationships. So rivers give life to the land. They're nurseries for plants and animals. They're irrigators and producers of kai, food. Dwelling places for taniwha, the powerful ancestral beings, and their mātauranga. Highways for eels and fish, and for people and their goods. And markers of memories, of boundaries, connections, events, and ancestors. Indeed, their ancestors themselves. And at the same time, people identify themselves with rivers, introducing themselves with the names of their ancestral rivers and mountains, and their kin group. So here in Tūranganui-a-Kiwa, in Gisborne, you might say, as I'm sitting here at Waikereru, ko Motukeo, te maunga, Motukeo is the mountain, ko Waimata te awa, Waimata is the river. I might say Ngāti Pākehā, others might say Te Aitanga Maheki, te iwi, from here. And I know that Gerard's going to talk about this, but in this way of thinking and being, rivers and people are existentially entangled. Ko te awa, ko Aotearoa, ko te awa ko au. Ke te mate te awa, ke te mate ahau. You know, I'm the river is me. If the river's dying, so am I. And these ideas of order and mate, and that's a whanganui saying, so I was thinking that Gerard would use it first, but he'll be coming soon. In these ways of thinking, these ideas of order and mate, sickness, degradation, and even death on the one hand, mate, ke te mate te awa, ke te mate ahau, if the river's dying, so am I, but also order, well-being, health, prosperity. They're easily grasped, these kinds of ideas, and they operate at different scales. So they can apply to complex dynamic networks of relationships among individuals, communities, within ecosystems, in nations, or the planet. The planet itself can be in a state of mate. And many people would think that that's exactly what's going on at the moment. So I thought I'd talk very briefly about a project that I'm involved in with Gary, with Dan, had some links with Gerard in some of this work as well, and a number of others. Te Aotearoa, the Voice of the River project, where we're seeking to understand the lives of rivers based on exchanges between different ways of being in the world. Not just different knowledge systems, but different ways of being in the world and different understandings about how the world works. And mātauranga Māori, or wānanga Māori on the one hand, and science on the other. So the framing of our project is relational and interconnected, with a whakapapa framing on this side, and ideas of engaging with rivers as ancestral beings, and with a complex systems approach on the other, where we're seeing rivers as living communities of land and water, plants, animals, and people, and trying to trace their trajectories through space and time. And this philosophical approach is grounded in the colonial history of Aotearoa and the Pacific. And it's aiming to transcend the limits of modernist science by creating dialogue between scholars and practitioners who draw on different cultural trajectories and knowledge systems. The urgency of this kind of inquiry is provoked by what I see as a causal link between fractured, siloed approaches to river science and management based on ancient Western dichotomies and ideas about rivers and other living systems as resources created for human purposes, and waterways, on the other hand, that are increasingly polluted, choked by sediment. Nearly all the rivers, including the Waimata on the east coast and Te Rāwhiti, are choking to death, degraded and dying. So we have a Marsden proposal that we're waiting to hear about, which is called Let the River Speak. And here we are trying to foster innovative exchanges between different ways of thinking as well as different disciplines. So this is not really a transdisciplinary project. It's between different ways of being and knowing about rivers, as well as about different disciplinary approaches to river systems. And we're trying to work at the same time very hand in glove with local communities, including iwi, local and central government agencies, farmers, foresters, riverside residents, businesses, and those who paddle, row, swim, fish in our river, in the rivers, and also on a range of practical interventions that are aimed at restoring rivers to a state of order, thriving, prosperous, full of life. And that's not just the river itself, but its plants, its animals, and its people. We are hoping that this kind of relational, outcome-focused kind of research might be able to transcend modernist divisions between theory and practice, people and the environment, culture and nature, and to revitalize overlooked genealogies, including those in Western science, that link the arts, the humanities, technology, and the natural and social sciences. We've already had a pilot project with Gary and quite a number of staff and students from the School of Environment, where we've worked on the Waimata among other rivers in Gisborne. And Gary and his colleagues, and I've had a role in this, and so has Dan, have come up with some very innovative analyses of the geomorphological rights of rivers, very much inspired by the Whanganui River, the Te Awa Tupua Act and its framing, but also new approaches to rivers governance. And we're now in the Marsden interested in expanding these relations and connections to investigate topics that include links between river pollution and the health of all the life forms in and around the river, including people, forest ecology, and new ways of working with river communities to restore them to a flourishing state. And we're working, as I mentioned, with the Waimata River in Gisborne, graduate students, working with local farmers, with foresters, iwi and wānanga experts, waka-ama paddlers, kayakers, swimmers and surfers, to try and bring this river community, land, water, plants, animals, and its people back to a state of order. Nā reira, koina ngā kōrero, I tēnei wā, ka nui ngā mihi aroha ki a tātou katoa.
With Naremu, with Gerard, or continue? Continue. Christian?
Thank you very much. Kia ora, Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christiane Allen, and I am the Associate Director of Koitu, the Centre for Informed Futures, new research centre here at the university. But through the vision and strategic approach of your own HOD here at the School of Environment, JR, I also get to spend some time here at the School of Environment, and so I am very pleased to be part of this discussion today. One of the things that I work on is issues of policy dynamics for really difficult, entrenched, difficult, long-term, sort of slow burn problems where there are complex societal values on the one hand and technical issues on the other. And I dare say that River Futures in Aotearoa qualifies as just such an issue. And so I have the pleasure of introducing someone whom I think really has sat at the epicenter of just how complex this really gets for a long time. So Trish Kirkland-Smith is now the head of environmental partnerships at Fonterra. And before that, she had led the company's approach to environmental and sustainability in New Zealand and globally. So now she's really spearheading that whole approach, and came to that from being the national manager for the Living Water Partnership, which was, as I understand it, a public-private partnership between Fonterra and DOC. So had previously been on the DOC side and now looking at the Fonterra side. So I think she's probably seen it all. So we're really delighted to have you here and look forward to hearing what you have to share. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for the kind introduction. Definitely at the epicentre, it feels like. Thanks, Gary, for the invite to be on the panel. A real privilege, and hope I can offer just a small contribution, which is to a really big discussion. And I've taken the questions quite literally that we were asked, and hopefully we can work our way through that. Do I know how to get the presentation up, if possible? Thank you.
Do you know which one?
Is that one there? Thank you.
No dramas.
Thank you so much. So Gary asked us what could the future look like for our rivers in Aotearoa and New Zealand, and I was thinking, well, that's quite a refreshing and positive thing for me to ponder, because normally we're just looking at all the problems.
Well, I'm just trying to get full page.
Just go down that one there.
That one.
Perfect. Love it. So, what could it look like? For me, this is my personal view. I would like it to be a future where we've reframed our relationship with nature. We would have realised that caring for nature, regenerating nature, is needed for our survival, not the survival of the planet, actually the survival of our species. And that healthy water, healthy ecosystems are needed for people to be healthy and for communities to really thrive. It would be a future where our extractive business models no longer existed. Our institutions and our legislation and our policy settings would actually reflect that. And there would be a strong kaitiakitanga approach to resource management. I think we would have embraced diversity, that's of people, at place, of ways of thinking. We would have easy ways for people to be involved in determining what the future of our regions and our communities looked and felt like. We would have built resilience into our natural systems, into our communities, and also into our businesses. We would have looked to nature for the solutions, instead of just engineering and dominating nature and relying on technological fixes. And fundamentally, our landscapes would look and feel different. There would be space for nature. Our rivers, our streams would meander in natural courses. There would be biodiverse ecosystems in rural landscapes and urban landscapes. And that's the kind of future that I personally kind of want to live in, and I would hope that that would also be doing the right thing for our rivers. So we were asked to think about how would it work. I think we should be embracing our unique history, our culture. We need to learn the stories of the land from the people of the land. We need to learn Te Reo Māori, we need to learn the place names, the names of our waterways that Māori have, they've known for all of this time that we can dismiss and not reflect on. I think we need to resolve our grievances, and really at the end of it, it's as simple as honouring the treaty. I think we should be acknowledging the past, and we need to learn from the past. It wasn't that long ago that we were incentivising the draining of wetlands and the damming of rivers. And, you can't blame the people for behaving in the context that they were in, but we can learn from that. And it's taken us generations to get to where we are now, and it's really going to be, it's going to take a while to unwind that. We have had narratives and reinforced mindsets, and that's really difficult stuff to work on for people. But we do need our mindsets to change, and we need to do that faster than they've ever changed before. We should employ new frameworks that recognise ecological and social dimensions, not just economic. So framework like Kate Rowe's donut economics. We need an ecological accounting system that's fit for the future we want. We need to true cost things, we need to true price things, we need to truly incentivise in the right ways. And we should be embracing transparency and the verification of how we're progressing. As a nation that relies on our biological economy for growing food and for tourism, I think this is really critical that we show the progress we're making, and I think it could be a huge advantage to us as well. And I think we should be racing to restore and regenerate rather than what it feels like right now, which is racing to the bottom lines and the minimums. I personally think we've put too much energy in fighting over the minimums, and we all know that more needs to be done for restoring our rivers and our water bodies, but we've been just focusing on being a bit less bad, minimising our impacts, mitigating around the edges. So we really should be thinking about how can we be doing more good? How can we be regenerative? How can we race toward aspiration rather than minimums? But what do we have to do to get there? Well, there's a lot. It's a big question, thanks Gary. And I've got a bit of a shopping list, and I am going to basically read it. So bear with me. Signals. We need the right signals from leaders, from policy settings, from communities, from consumers. There are two main factors that drive change in the farming sector. That's price and regulations. There are social and cultural factors that also impact that. I'm not discrediting that, but the big drivers are price and regulation, and so these are critical signals that we've got to get right. I think we need some new language. We talk about drains, not streams. We talk about primary sector, not the ecological economy. And the definition of primary sector is industries involved in the extraction and production of raw materials. And that doesn't sound like a sector that we should have in the future. Mindsets. So I've spoken about we need to be curious. We need learning and growth mindsets. We need to be open to changing our minds and respecting the people who do, rather than just saying, see, I told you you were wrong. Understanding. We need to understand the problems. We need to seek to understand how people are impacted, others, not just ourselves. We see this in river catchments, where we have the upstream and the downstream relationship. We have to recognise that there are different impacts for different people and different groups, and around the different values that we hold. And, you know, there's going to have to be some hard compromises made. Depoliticising. Can we depoliticise our environmental challenges? I'm no expert in this, but what I do know is business-like certainty and the political swings aren't helpful for long-term investment. So making those decisions, businesses need the certainty. People, we need people to really champion and get behind our river, our aspirations for rivers and for the environment. We've seen things like predator-free do that. How do we do that for water? You know, they've shown that when people actually form a tribe around achieving a really brave goal, that they can accelerate change. So seeing that in the water space, and you know, we're starting to hear those catchment stories like Anne was talking about, with communities really setting those aspirational goals for themselves. Science, we need to follow the science. The science needs to be agreed, automated, and accessible to land stewards. I think there's a big gap here between urban and rural, with the actual size of the rural area, making the cost of the science that's required to do catchment planning and make those investment decisions, it's actually really expensive. So we need to figure out how to automate that better. Systems, Anne talked about this, but we need to kind of stop being reductionist and siloed. We think about nitrogen and sediment and climate and biodiversity separately most of the time, and this causes us issues. And we also need to acknowledge that there's different scales for addressing these systems. There's the farm or the individual land parcel, there's the waterway, there's the water network and the catchment, there's habitats and there's ecosystem scales. In the rural space, a lot of the focus is on the individual land parcel, and I don't think focusing on just that is going to be enough for the regenerative work that we need to do. Capability, we need to build capability across all players. Things are moving fast, and the change needed in that education and training needed for these challenges is actually too slow. We talk a lot about collaborating and working together, but do we all have the skills needed to be able to do that, be that, facilitate that process or even just participate in a collaborative process? From our experience, then, on the ground, we're really struggling in that space around having the capability to do that work. And finally, just support each other and enable the support of the change that's required. There's the saying that we will go, faster and further if we go together. And that support comes in extension programs and storytelling and data and information, sustainable finance and simple and streamlined requirements and processes. So that's the end of the shopping list. Finally, one of the questions we were asked is if the approach is incremental transition or radical transformation. And I'm just going to say it depends. And isn't it a combo? I think it depends on the situation. We can be quite transformational if there is a crisis in the now, like COVID or an earthquake. I think we absolutely are facing an environmental crisis, but it isn't hitting us in that same way as the in-the-moment shocks of COVID and earthquakes. So how do you motivate a crisis-like response, but without the big, ugly shocks? Maybe it is a combo then. Maybe we need some transformational thinking, supported by realistic and just transitions. So I'll leave things there for now. Kia ora, and thank you.
Thanks immensely for that. We're now going to move on, and Kevin Simon is going to introduce our next speaker.
Great.
Kia ora koutou katoa. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a freshwater ecologist and associate professor in the School of Environment, and so naturally I and all the wonderful students that I work with in my lab were excited to see this topic, so thank you, Gary, for organizing it, and the many people who have helped pull it off. So I have the distinct pleasure of being able to introduce our next speaker, Colleen Brent. Colleen comes to us from Auckland Council. She's an environmental scientist who's worked for Auckland Council for 10 years in several different roles. Her specialty is in freshwater management in the urban sector, in particular stream restoration and watercourse assessments. Colleen has worked in catchment management team, generating catchment management plans and developing projects to mitigate flooding, improve water quality, and protect waterways. During her time working with the operations team, she managed the maintenance of 5 public water courses in central Auckland, including weed control, debris jam removal, and riparian planting. In her current role, Colleen's primarily in the urban space, and she's working on assessing and remediating stream bank erosion and providing support to the stormwater management plans with technical knowledge of freshwater systems, as well as management of the watercourse assessment program. So Colleen, thank you much for coming. And
Should have checked beforehand.
It'll come.
It'll come. So many photos, guys. So many photos. Security alert. Thank you. It's such a privilege to be here to represent Healthy Waters and to be alongside all of my distinguished panelists. So thank you very much. In my presentation, I'm just going to give a brief introduction about Healthy Waters and what we do. And there's lots of different aspects to us, but I'm just going to highlight 3 aspects and give an overview on them, and then give an example or a little case study about how we do that. Then I'm going to give you a quick summary, and then I'm going to talk about what everyone out there can do to make sure our streams are healthy. So when I started the stormwater department back 10 years ago, I was donning my waders and my macroinvertebrate net, and I was out doing stream surveys. My team was primarily hydraulic modelers, catchment planners, and civil engineers, and I was basically the lone ecologist. But Healthy Waters, or Stormwater Unit, has evolved into the Healthy Waters department, and that is because we realized that we need to support a more holistic approach to stormwater. We still want to protect our people and our property from flooding, but we also realize that we need to preserve the health and value of our waterways and our harbors for future generations. So now I am supported and on a team with other scientists, environmental engineers, and ecologists, so we get to collaborate together and learn from each other, which is great because we have a big job in front of us. This is a map of all the waterways in Auckland, lots of blue up there. We are blessed to have 474 rivers and streams throughout our region. That's over 16,000 kilometers of streams that flow continuously year-round. And just to give some perspective, the coastline of New Zealand is 15,000 kilometers. We also have another 4,500 streams that so we see for short periods of time, and then we have many, many others that we see just after a rain event. A lot of our streams are small and narrow, but we do have some big river systems like the Aotearoa, which is 28 kilometers long. So we have a big job in front of us. And managing streams in a pristine environment like the Waitakere Ranges or the Hanuas is a little bit easier. But when we have the demands like we do in Auckland with growth, it's a different story. Right now, there's 1.6 million people living in Auckland, and in the next 30 years, it's supposed to go up to 2.4 million. And as Aucklanders, we really value, our water and our environment, so we really need to take the time and energy to protect them. And so that's what we want to do in a few ways. And of course, the way we have to do this is we have to know our streams and catchments. And we realize that all of our streams and all of our catchments are different. There's no one-size-fits-all solution that's going to solve all our problems. Up here on the slide above me, it's very busy because we've got a lot going on. It shows what Healthy Waters and the rest of Council has developed. We have numerous tools and models and databases to help us understand our waterways across the region and also our catchments, so we can better inform our watercourse management strategies. Analyzing all this information across all these platforms, we can determine well-informed mitigation options and appropriate management approach, so we hopefully won't cause any more damage in the future. So one of these, which is near and dear to my heart, our databases, are the watercourse assessments. So these surveys and reports provide baseline information on the existing condition of our watercourses. So in the past 15 years, we have surveyed every inch of 2,000 kilometers of stream. So as you can see on this map behind me, primarily in the urban area we've looked at, we're also expanding to the rural landscape also, and also the greenfields areas. So this gives us a good baseline information, but we also use the data and the information we get from here to help with our management choices for these streams. And one thing that has become clear through these watercourse assessments is we are experiencing significant stream bank erosion across the region. And so we realized, all right, well, we need to do something more about that. So we're in the exciting time where we're developing new tools and new models to help us evaluate the best way to manage our stream bank erosion across the region. And we also are conducting some research on root tensile strength of 11 native plant species to help us with that too. So as you can see, we're still learning and we're still always trying to improve. So the next is, how do we implement all of this knowledge and everything we have? So here we have some unfortunate photos from which can be sometimes a common scene around Auckland. And I like how Anne said it, and she said, where are the plants? Where are the animals? Where are the people? And I mean, we can't blame the people that made these decisions back then, because back then the objectives were conveyance and flood management. We need to get our water from point A to point B as quickly as possible, or let's put it in a pipe. That way it's really gonna manage all the flooding. But yeah, where are the people? Where are the plants? Where are the animals? So instead of having these two objectives, which we do agree are important for urban streams, we still need conveyance and we still need flood management. But what else can we do? So this is an example of our Oakley Cree restoration project, which started off, as you can see in the upper smaller photo, which is 1.3 kilometers of concrete line channel. And we decided that let's look at this in a different way. So we've had a cycleway that's been put in. We have community spaces for gathering. We have artistic expression. We have areas where there's outdoor classrooms there. We have all these native plants. And we also have an inspired playground, I believe the first of its kind, that's based on Maori play. So we're having multiple objectives throughout here. And also a huge focus of this project was looking at wider social and economic values by starting up a stewardship program and also starting a nursery in here where a lot of these plants that are in the ground were supplied from. So this restoration project offered multiple functions and multiple benefits, and it didn't have to have just a concrete line channel. So we want to take this same approach to further projects around the city. So next, as we know, we have all these waterways across Auckland. And we know that improving the water quality is not a one-time fix. And it requires our unwavering commitment, not only from ourselves, but also from multiple organizations and Auckland communities throughout the region. Healthy Waters is dedicated to working alongside our iwi partners, community groups, developers, and our private landowners to enhance, protect, and maintain our watercourses. From the outset, we are partnering with Mana Whenua in our watercourse management projects to seek direction, to understand their aspirations for the project, and also opportunities for integrating their ideas into design. In this picture are two of our kaitiaki from our erosion management program up in the Aotearoa, and their involvement is to monitor the progress of our project and also to look at all the outcomes that we want from it. We also, there are numerous community groups throughout the region that are trying to improve their local waterways. And we have a dedicated team in Healthy Waters to support and engage with these groups. Up here on the picture, we have one of our Y-Care groups that is monitoring the water quality at this little reach of stream and just doing their bit to look after it. We are also providing guidance for our developers on how to use water-sensitive design with a specific focus on stormwater and freshwater management. And up here on this picture, we see one of our bioinfiltration devices treating for water quality at Long Bay. While Auckland Council and EUE do manage streams across the region, a large portion of that 16,000 kilometers of streams are on private properties. And we need our private property owners to look after them. One way that Healthy Waters is supporting this is through the Waterway Protection Fund. And this is, this was created to encourage our rural landowners to fence their stream for stock exclusion and to plant. Over the course of this fund, we have restored over 50 kilometers of stream by fencing, which equates to almost 60 hectares of riparian habitat that's been restored. So in this picture here, we have our before shot of a stream that is incised and having some erosion issues. And the recipients of the Waterway Protection Fund said, doing this with just plants is not going to solve the issue. So instead, the banks are battered back to a gentle gradient and then planted with over 12,000 trees, protecting over 430 square meters of riparian habitat. So not only is the stream corridor protected, improving the aquatic and the riparian vegetation, but also we have landowners that are engaged with maintaining and enhancing their watercourses. So just a summary, what have we done here? So a healthy stream to us is one that's resilient and it has enduring mitigation solutions and practices. And we determine those by using all of our models and our data and our knowledge and our information to put forward robust management strategies for the watercourses. We also, for a stream is healthy. A healthy stream is more than just its physical attributes. A watercourse can deliver a range of outcomes: environmental, social, economic, and cultural. And a healthy stream is looked after not only by Council and iwi, but Aucklanders all take a role in guardianship. So what can all of you do out there near Netland and over here in this lecture hall? Well, you can share your knowledge with us. I think, Trish said, make science available. That's vice versa. We want to know, we would like to share our knowledge with us. All those tools and databases that we have, we would love to share that with you all around streams. And also, if you're doing something interesting with research, come talk to us. Or if you even see an outfall in your stream that's suffering from erosion, come talk to us. These are things we want to know. So let's share our knowledge about streams and catchments. Next, go visit your local stream. We have 16,000 kilometers of them. There can't be one that's far away from your house. So go visit it and do so with an enhanced awareness of not just the ecology, but what's it doing for the amenity and the spiritual side of it and those kind of things. So really take a holistic view of your watercourse. And lastly, advocate for your watercourse. Go out and join a community group. Look and see what's going on for stream-sized plantings. Get out there with a spade. And I know if we're all working in this together, we can get some good, healthy waterways across the Auckland region and across Aotearoa. So thank you, guys. That's me.
Thanks very much. I think we're going to go Brendan's introduction for Mike Joy.
Kia ora koutou from Te Whanganui Atara. There is a lot of talk these days about an excess of negativity, too much anxiety. If only everyone were more upbeat, they say, we could solve a whole array of social and environmental issues while also having a great time. It seems to me, though, that we are not short of positivity. Rather, we are deluged with snippets of upbeat information. Companies planting trees to offset carbon emissions, birds returning to the streets during lockdown, and ministers for the environment who can turn rivers swimmable overnight by revising water quality standards. Sometimes, in the face of this relentless positivity, not my phrase, we need someone to remind us that, actually, quite a lot of things are pretty crappy and we should probably do something about it. Our next speaker takes his role as critic and conscience of society very seriously. Dr. Mike Joy is a Senior Research Fellow in the School of Government at Victoria University of Wellington. His research and public advocacy regarding the state of our freshwater are well known in this country. I knew of Mike before he was famous, first becoming aware of his work with Russell Death on freshwater fish and stream invertebrates during my year of honours study. A combination that tends to stick in the mind, Joy and Death developed a series of tools for assessing and understanding the ecological condition of New Zealand's waterways. Since then, Mike has become a household name, known for his tenacious commitment to highlighting the declining state of freshwater in Aotearoa. He has published in a wide range of venues, from aquatic ecology journals to the Journal of Urgent Writing. His 2015 book, Polluted Inheritance, is described as a call to arms for New Zealand's freshwater. Perhaps rather appropriately, it also shares its name with a death metal band from the province of Zeeland in the Netherlands. In recent years, Mike has been the recipient of a number of awards recognising this work, including the Royal Society of New Zealand Charles Fleming Award for Protection of the New Zealand Environment, the Morgan Foundation River Voice Award, the New Zealand University's Critic and Conscience Award, and he was a semi-finalist for New Zealand of the Year in 2018. Not bad for just another scientist. Kia ora, Dr. Mike Joy.
That's fantastic. I don't have to say anything now, do I? Dr. Doom, is my other name. Thanks very much, Gary, for inviting me and to be with these esteemed panelists. Hi to Anne as well. I hope she's still listening out there somewhere. Okay, I've just come. I haven't done my homework. I didn't read the questions. So I've come totally unprepared. I spent a day at the Waitangi Tribunal for a cross-examination yesterday down in Wellington, and that was Waitangi claim for Ngāti Raukawa, for the southern part of Ngāti Raukawa, and I've also been involved with the Y2358, the water ownership claim, as a witness for the Māori Council as well. And really, if I could summarise what came out of that work, a couple of 100 pages of reports that I wrote with the team there, was really the failure to protect fresh water is with the agencies, the failure of the Ministry for the Environment and the failure of the councils. And it's just everywhere we go, that's what comes up. And it's, I don't want to, I've got some of my best friends and students work for councils and the Ministry for the Environment, and I'm not trying to disparage them. These organisations are less than the sum of their parts. You know, there's fantastic people there, but somehow what comes out of them is, and I guess that I'm particularly angry about it because having told my students for the last 20 years that governments don't change, we give governments the mandate and then they change. So having spent 20 years highlighting the freshwater issues in New Zealand and giving this government, this coalition government, the best mandate possible, where 80% of New Zealanders say that freshwater is their #1 issue, to work on the Science Technical Advisory Group that was instigated by this government and tell this government, or tell the minister what he needs to do as far as the science side of things to protect freshwaters, how gutting it is to have them completely fail at that. So my faith in democracy has been sort of damaged or jarred by this process. So and so I there's this frustration with the council's failure to do that, and it's about priorities. I mean, I'm struck being in Wellington and working downtown, seeing parking wardens everywhere running around doing a great job on parking. If we had as many people in New Zealand monitoring our waterways as we do parking wardens, then we wouldn't have a problem. The failure is not with the legislation, it's the enforcement. It's the monitoring and enforcement that's not done. The RMA is really clear that we can't do what we do to rivers, but no one's enforcing it. That's where the failure is. And while I'm in Auckland, I can have a go at Auckland, where they have a healthy rivers group, but my friends who are working in Aotearoa, and there's a new subdivision going in there, and massive amounts of sediment from what's happening with that housing subdivision going out into the Aotearoa Bay and destroying the habitat in there, and trying to get Auckland Council to do something about that, and just being incredibly frustrated. So you can't fix a problem while you still allow it to happen. Planting up waterways, whatever, and totally agree with everything that Trish said in her talk, but you can't clean up a river while you're still polluting it. We have to go to the cause of these things. We have to put the fence at the top of the cliff, not the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. And so that's where I see our problems. And we need to kind of to change that way of thinking. And I guess I'm particularly frustrated because seeing this instant response of this government to the COVID crisis. And so why do epidemiologists get listened to when freshwater ecologists and geomorphologists don't get listened to? And it's obviously about timeline and immediacy, isn't it? It's like, here's something that's going to hit us right now versus something that we can sort of kick down the road for a bit longer. I could, and we have huge issues with freshwater in New Zealand, and we're not addressing it. We're not stopping it. We haven't decreased the damage that's being done despite all of the talk. Councils and Ministry for the Environment have got really good at PR and comms and covering up and dropping monitoring of sites in the worst places. We've just seen our National River Water Quality Network, 77 sites that are monitored and have been since 1989. Only half of them are downstream sites. Half of those have been dropped since 2015. So that's how you make a problem go away. You stop measuring it, and we need to know about that. And the other thing, in an area that I'm working in quite a bit now, where I thought that we would get more happening, was that the connection now is really obvious between what we're doing on the land to human health. So I don't know if you have been following any of my work around with Michael Baker from the Otago School of Medicine and others around colorectal cancer. So colorectal cancer is the second biggest killer of, as far as cancers go in the world. We have the highest rates of colorectal cancer of any country in the developed world in New Zealand. The highest rates of colorectal cancer in the really intensively farmed parts of New Zealand where drinking water comes from groundwater. We've just been doing some work around that, and it's not published yet, but a very high proportion of New Zealanders, we now have the data on nitrate levels in drinking water for 4 million New Zealanders, and a very high proportion of New Zealanders are receiving drinking water that have levels of nitrate that are higher than the significant increase in the risk of getting colorectal cancer, which, by the way, is 10 times less than the Ministry of Health's maximum allowable value for nitrate, because this is emerging science. We're still working on a maximum allowable value from 100 years ago, and the science is so, but we haven't changed those limits. These are the kind of issues that are coming to us. The nitrate is coming from fossil fuels via intensive dairy farming and horticulture in New Zealand. So there is just negative process there, and it's going to harm it is harming not just freshwater ecosystems but also human health, and this is going to become a much bigger issue in the next few years when people become more aware of that. Am I running out of time? 2 minutes, okay, cool. All right, so what we need to do in the future is we have to think about, and I think Trish touched on this, the multiple impacts and gains. Okay, so if we look across, the biggest impact is intensive farming as far as length of rivers in New Zealand by a long shot. And urban streams and waterways are less than 1% of the waterway length in New Zealand. So it's that intensive farming that we need to do something about. If we take, and it's greenhouse gas issues as well as sedimentation, as well as nutrients going into waterways that affect lakes, rivers, groundwater, estuaries, oceans. We have to have a complete rethink of that. And if we silo things, and Anne mentioned this, we're always working in silos, greenhouse gases, nitrate, pathogens, as if they're all separate things. If we do something like, which is the farming kind of view, is let's do something about methane emissions by say, coming up with some, treatment that will reduce methane, or they can eat seaweed and that will be less methane. That fixes one problem. Half the number of cows in this country, you fix all of those problems. And it's not half means half the impact, it's way more than half the impact, because the exponential rise in impacts means that it's a negative exponential. You get rid of half the cows, you get rid of way more than half the problem. So we have to think about that. When we think about that's radical change, yes, we need radical change. That was the last question, incremental or radical. We're way past incremental. It's radical, and we're talking about rivers, but that is a subset of the kind of change we need to have the bigger issues around climate change and all the multiple impacts that are coming at civilization at the moment. If this country can't do it with nitrogen, we're not going to be able to do it with carbon, with greenhouse gas emissions. So when we gave this government the mandate, they had the opportunity. We've been through all the normal processes and it didn't work. So we need radical change, but I also want to mention and remind people that radical change, what we're doing now is radical. Okay, we have to realise that how we live now and what we do now and what we do on the land is radical. What we have to shift to is nowhere near as radical as what we're doing at the moment. That will leave it at that. Thank you.
So thanks very much for that, and I guess it's not 2020 if you don't have some kind of technical hitch somewhere along the way. So unfortunately, the circumstances with Gerard have not been resolved over the last half hour or so. But we hopefully it's still available online, and if we want to ask questions for Gerard, then we'll get the chance to do so. So I did ask people for questions, and I've had the great fortune in my time here at University of Auckland to work with some very provocative and challenging individuals who've gone through the classes that we've taught here over the last few years. And one of these fellows is a guy called Mark Tadaki, who now works at the Cawthron Institute in Nelson. And Mike, he has a question for you, right? And I'm going to switch things away a little bit from the Dr. Doom kind of ethos, right? And it's a thorny one, right? It's not an easy one. What kind of democratic institutions do you think we need to be working with if we're going to create healthy rivers?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think I know, I'm not sure I know what the question is, but what it means, but obviously my faith in democracy has been severely shaken by what's just happened. But I see that the solution is, so the problem with the councils and the ministries is the politicisation of them. It's not because the people there don't want to know, don't want to do the right thing. It's the politicisation of those councils. So somehow we have to get independence, and I think there's two possibilities there. Probably my choice would be tēnā rangatira. I would like to see Māori take over managing freshwater in New Zealand, and that would be my favourite solution, my favoured solution. but the other part of that would be, if we can't have that, or if we can have partially that, we need to have independence. So something along the lines of the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment is one possibility, but we have to take that political aspect away, because we can see how politicisation just means we never take the tough decisions, because it's always trying to please most people.
Okay, we have a response comment from...
I was going to chip in on this one as well, and Gary, maybe I could suggest that, in some ways democracy might not be the answer around rivers. We're taking whakapapa seriously. Maybe, I think in a community like ours, for example, we can build a kind of whānau around the Waimata River. We can get people seeing that they've got this sense of kinship with their river, but with the plants and the animals and the people that they share it with as well. Because any of these other institutional framings are going to leave a lot of people out. And they're not going to include the plants and the animals. You're going to go back to a technocratic approach. And I think the whakapapa's got a lot to teach us. And one of it's about how do you build those relationships with each other, with the plants, having thriving forests around rivers, with the animals in the rivers, but the birds beside it and so on. We're doing it through programs with kids, the wakaama paddlers, the kayakers. I can see a future for rivers which relies on kinship, perhaps, rather than democracy.
Lovely response. Is Gerard available? Yeah, so Gerard, I think, can offer a very timely sort of follow-up comment in relation to these issues. So when we can pass over to him right now.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, I think it is time, and I think I can chip in here, because my presentation, which I was just on the cusp of achieving, is pictured in exactly the same place. How can we bring a total view about what a river is? And so, and I will do it this time, sharing screen. The PowerPoint that I'm going to put up examines it. And it talks about our river settlement and the creation of the old footwater. A legal status that's different to any other river in New Zealand, or the world for that matter. So I call it changing heart, changing mind, because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It actually works on people. It asks us to be more in tune with one another in a communal way, and then of course then it will change our minds about what we need to do. And of course we need to focus in on our rivers directly. Mike's right, and I think so is Anne, that perhaps democracy is not the best way to actually be treating a river and dealing with it. I'll explain. Most of us have kind of dealt with the government before, and of course, things are simple propositions. We want to do best by our river, and we say, can you give us the tool to do that? So they're using the example here of Paul. The Crown says, oh yes. And the government, local government, is the same, because they're captured by the same statute that the Crown runs. And I may have worked like this for a long time. We want to do something really simple. We need fit for purpose solution. The Crown says, great, we'll take that concept and we'll give it back to you. This is what you get. And they said, no, we've broadened it out. We've actually provided more platforms to actually address it, and so we get more bang for buck. Well, really what they've done is a complicated, very simple proposition. And that very simple proposition is just to have this. Of course, they will complicate it constantly by delivering this to us. And that's, of course, that political machine. And we're in the throes of a general election campaigning and, of course, voting in a very short time. And of course, this is what it will always get you. So we need to bring that communal spirit around our rivers. And Ngāti, now she introduced me, and my relationship with Ngāti was she's a karangarua. She's a relation. Her father, Rangitiri Taupara, was one of my mentors when I was younger. A very knowledgeable man, a very wise man. And it was he who said to us in 2008, as an iwi, he said, we must go back to the things that we know. And instead of arguing through the constructs that Crown presents us with, argue through our own understanding of what a river is. And this is where we come back to legal personhood is not the purpose of ordinary arrangements. Legal personhood is a vehicle, but it's not the actual function. The function is, of course, is to uphold kaua, which is the communal view held by a community for what a river is. And that's our law system. That's what we've grown up with and lived with for many, many centuries, if not millennia, in this country. And if we can share that with the community, which we have in this framework, we'll be in a much better place. So it's comprised of four kaua. The kaua tuatai, the first kaua, is that the river is now a physical and metaphysical entity. So no argument about being able to emote and have a relationship in an emotional and spiritual sense with the river, whether you are tangata whenua or whether you are people who come after us. It doesn't matter. If we're going to do what's best by the river, we need to be able to address it through both its metaphysical as well as physical side. And of course, most of our statutes have only dealt with a physical river, a physical resource. The second kaua, the kaua tuarua, is that it establishes that the river is an indivisible entity. So you can't approach it by its parts. You must approach it as a whole. So you don't split up the bed, the river, the water, the banks, the land that drains into it, as the RMA does it. You come at it as a holistic approach in its most basic sense. A river is like a person. And you can't address the child or a person by only talking to the left hand or the right hand. And of course, government's been set up that way as well, in a very disjointed way. And though we've tried to strive towards integrated management, it's never actually happened, because the integrated management speaks of trying to get councils and bodies and spirit interests working together. Whereas in the old people created as an indivisible entity, we haven't created, we've always held the view, but we've created that law now, an indivisible entity, which people are compelled by law to actually address as a whole. So you focus in on the river and all that it is. So those first two kaua address what the river is in its fullest sense. It's a physical and metaphysical entity, and it's an indivisible one from its source to the sea. Then, of course, you've got to deal with people. And for a very long time, there's been this vexed issue about where the mana whenua, the mana tangata fit in with this river. We've argued through constructs that are around tenure, ownership of the river, and of course, none of them have actually captured the exact nature of our relationship with the river. So, by going back to kaua and establishing that we're actually an axiomatic part of this river, you don't need to confer a status on us. So we don't need Section 4 of the Conservation Act or Section 67A and 8 of the Resource Management Act to tell us we have a relationship with this river. It's a given. It's axiomatic. Doesn't need to be programmed. It just is. And then, of course, we get across a lot of the vexed issues that have hampered us and encumbered us through history. The fourth kaua is that we need to obligate the community into this setup. And so this is where the communal view has to be upheld, not only by the whole iwi, but by the whole community. And it's compelled at law now to uphold the obligation to the Aotearoa, to the holistic river, and not just the parts of the river and the compartments that it's been broken down to in statute. So you see, we've actually established a way to actually share a communal view of the river and compel people at law to recognise it. And legal personhood, of course, just gives that status, that law, that you can hinge this to, so that you can defend it, speak for it, and uphold it in the courts if anyone tries to undermine it. So that's tūpō kaua. What I want to go on to just quickly is a view that an academic from the University of British Columbia, she wrote a piece in 2012, the name was, or is Elaine Shaw. And she said the story of the Whanganui iwi and Te Awa Tūpō is one of so many narratives of intertwined struggle for decolonisation of both people and nature. And of course what she's getting to is exactly what I think some of the panellists have been talking about tonight, is that so often we bring a colonised view to what a river is. And of course we're colonised as well. And what that means is that if we can accept that the river has a right to be, and of course those of us who belong to this river, who whakapapa to this river, understand the nature of the relationship, the correct relationship, which is through the sovereignty of the river itself. And so we've all been colonised, we've all been sucked into thinking that contestability around the use of natural resources is the way to actually treat the river. We've all been conned into thinking that there is, you know, an anthropocentric priority here, that we must control nature. And of course, that's been the wrong approach. And so we need to decolonise ourselves. And so, she pointed out, we had no interaction with it, but she saw it from afar in 2012, well before, of course, we signed the deed of seal in education in 2017. Now, she also said that the principles, and she was referring to tūpō kaua, clearly demonstrate the relationship between the river and its people, but also the interconnectedness of their sovereignty. So if we want a sovereign river, we need to act in a sovereign way. We need to strip ourselves back from the encumbrances of government, of the disjoint and disparate nature of government, and see the river as a constant. So in establishing tūpō kaua as the law system for our river, what we've established is that, in essence, everything else can operate around us until it's ready to come back in to our system, to tūpō kaua. So David Parker produced reforms around freshwater management. There's the three waters. None of it is compliant with Te Awa Tūpō because it didn't come through Te Awa Tūpō. But the constant is here, and of course, in a few weeks' time, we might have a different makeup to government, who knows? But of course, that's always going to change. We need to see our rivers and our communities as the constant and ensure that we have a communal way of approaching, dealing with our rivers. And I finished on this point. There's a picture of myself and my son on the right there, Ealing. It's actually from National Geographic, and I stole the picture from him. And so we took this photographer from National Geographic, who's from Europe, and he wanted to see tuna, wanted to see eels. We took him down and went to eel. And of course, my son, my youngest son, and myself, we tried to uphold the values of tūpō kaua through all our practices and our relationship with the river. On the left, a picture of a tūpuna, his name is Wipauro, and the Cree at the fire, and a little child, that's my grandmother. And this picture was taken in about 1895, or somewhere towards the end of the 19th century. And of course, you can see there, the inaki, you can see where their livelihood came from the river. And of course, we continue to uphold the values that they had. And I don't think it's a stretch to think that we can go back to those values. They lived a simple lifestyle. They lived on their land. My grandmother's adopted father, Paulo, the gentleman standing, he was a tōrunga Aotearoa of the people. And he was a very learned man. He didn't put on any years. That's the best clothes that he had for that photograph. His taonga that he carried, the knowledge that he carried, was all about the relationship with nature. And you see the inaki in the photo, and his relationship was exercised daily. So, you know, it's not a stretch when you look on the right there, the photo of myself and my son, that we can go back and continue to uphold those values. So I'll stop there, but I do want to make the point that I support all of the discussion tonight. The presentations are around the biophysical river and waterways, and that's important. But I think Mike and Anne are driving back to where we need to be. We need to treat our rivers as a communal focus and ensure that we strip ourselves of the encumbrances of government and see the river for what it is and act as community, not government, but as community around our river. Ka te ora tātou.
Sometimes the ways that we didn't plan things end up better than the ways that we did plan. It actually is a perfect place, I think, for us to finish. I think it gives us a remarkable sense of togetherness, this sense of indivisible entities, the ways that we relate to river systems. That is where my aspiration lies for the future, and I think that's what many people, many of the comments that we heard today reflect upon that. Issues around kinship, not technocratic solutions, but our relations to river systems. So we could have said that we planned that, and I couldn't have hated it, but at least that is a wonderful place for us to end up. We are on time. I just wanted to thank various people that have sort of helped make this happen. Samantha has been amazing as a sort of like the go-to person, and Bree from the marketing people at the uni, and John and the technical people from University of Auckland have really helped us arrive at this point, right, where we can wrap this thing up. And I'd just like to ask Dan just to say a few words of fond farewell before we head over to OGH, those of us who are in this facility anyway.
O kia ora mai tātou, te mea tūtahi ka mihi nui kia koutou katoa ngā kai karanga, ngā kai kōrero o te pōnei. Tēnei te mihi nui kia koutou katoa mō tō aroha ia mātou mō tō pukinga, mō tō māramatanga, mō tō mohiotanga e pāna ngā mea whakahirira nō reira. Tēnā koutou katoa mō tēnā. Koutou katoa ko tai mai I tēnei wāhi, koutou katoa ko tai mai I Wainanui I te Zui, tēnā koutou katoa mō tō koutou tautoko o te kaupapa o te rā, he karakia whakamotunga tēnei. Unuhia ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātia, kia māma, te kākau. A te tinana te wairu e te ara takoto, koira e roko, whakairia ake ki runga, tūturu whakamaua, kia tīna, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e, kia o mai tātou.